The poor girl got into the millionaire CEO's car, thinking it was an Uber, and won his heart. The rain came down in angry sheets. Grace Stone soaked through her second-hand blazer and, gripping a useless broken umbrella, ran toward the only black car that stopped at the curb. "Thank goodness you're here," she gasped, yanking the door open and diving inside. "Step on it, please. Today's the new CEO's presentation, and if I'm late..." The man behind the wheel didn't move. He just... Dark gray eyes. A suit too expensive for Uber. A silence too perfect. Grace didn't notice. She was already talking about the $9.00 croissant that ruined her budget, and her mismatched socks. One with penguins, the other with tacos. "I'm not crazy," she added, breathless. "Just cursed by Mondays." Then the car rolled forward. What she didn't know was that she wasn't talking to her Uber driver. She was talking to Thomas Miller, her new boss. Was he in? And he hadn't said a single word about it yet. But when he did, it would change everything. It was the kind of morning that tested your faith in the universe. The rain hadn't let up since 4 a.m. Grace Stone's phone had died the second she confirmed her Uber, and her umbrella had surrendered to the wind like a paper crane mid-sea. "Perfect," she muttered, breath fogging in the wet chill. "Just perfect." She was already late. Today was her first official day at Stonebridge Corporation, a job she'd begged the universe for, prayed through sleepless nights for, and now she was going to blow it. Her heart pounded as she scanned the street, desperate for a sign. Then, like a blessing, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. That had to be it. She rushed over, nearly tripping over her own feet, flung open the door, and slid inside. "Thank goodness you're here," she gasped. Go, step on it. If I miss this meeting, I'll be fired before I'm even hired. They say the new CEO is ruthless. Like no smile, no soul, fire you for breathing too long." The man behind the wheel said nothing. Grace barely glanced at him. She was too busy shaking rain off her sleeve, smoothing her hopeless ponytail, and talking to herself to stay sane. "Ooh, and just FYI, $9 for a croissant? Criminal. I'm still emotionally digesting it," she added, as if he cared. "Also, I'm wearing 2 different socks, look." She yanked up the cuff of one pant leg. One sock had Christmas penguins in hats. The other... Still, he said nothing. His silence should have warned her, but her nerves were louder than common sense. "You're one of those quiet Uber drivers, huh? Stoic. Mysterious. I like that. Safer than the chatty ones who tell you about their divorces and Bitcoin losses. You should write a book. Memoirs of a Silent Uber Driver. Bestseller." The light turned green. He drew... Grace exhaled, finally letting her body melt into the seat. He didn't know it yet, but she was in the wrong car. And 10 minutes later, she stepped out in front of the Stonebridge building, thanked the driver profusely, and raced inside, hair dripping, breath short, blouse clinging to her in all the wrong places. In the elevator, someone held the door for her. She didn't even say thank you. Her mind was spiraling. "Please let me blend in," she whispered as she squeezed into a crowded hallway. "Grace," someone hissed, "you almost missed the CEO's welcome meeting." Her stomach dropped. She didn't have time to fix her hair, her face, or her dignity. She followed the group into a gleaming conference room, heart hammering against her ribs. The room stilled. The double doors opened and he walked. All. Impeccable thorn gray eyes. The man from the car. Her breath caught, her spine stiffened, her folder slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a dull, humiliating thud. "This is Mr. Thomas Miller," the coordinator announced. "Our new CEO." Yamu stepped forward, gaze sweeping the room, until it landed on her. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. The look in his eyes, the faint smirk tugging at his mouth, said everything. "I hope my arrival didn't catch anyone off guard," he said, voice smooth, "especially those who mistook me." Laughter rippled like a wave across the room. Grace wished the floor would open up and swallow her whole. He had ordered the CEO to step on it. She had confessed to mismatched socks. She had mocked his silent aura and offered to put his face on a cookie. And now he stood there, barky-clad and amused, looking like a man who never forgot a joke made at his expense. He couldn't breathe. "Miss Stone," he said, eyes never leaving hers, "has already demonstrated great initiative and logistical creativity, important traits in a growing company." A few people snickered. He blinked. Was he praising her? Mocking? Both? The meeting continued. He didn't hear a word. When it ended, she tried to flee, but his voice stopped her again. "Mistook." He turned slowly, cheeks burning, legs shaky. "Yes, sir." "I hope your ride here was—" Oh, the corner of his mouth twitched. "Good. Some drivers deserve more than 5 stars. She stared at him, paralyzed. "Maybe even a promotion," he added, stepping just a little closer. "We'll talk later, Miss Stone. I have ideas." He winked, and walked away. Grace stood frozen in the hallway, folder clutched to her chest. He wasn't going to fire her. No, he was going to play with her. Yet Grace Stone had a sinking feeling that her Monday had just turned into the plot of a romantic corporate disaster. Chapter 1. The Wrong Ride, the Right Disaster. Grace had never been inside a building like Stonebridge Tower. The walls were glass, the floors gleamed like ice, and the receptionists looked like they'd been forged in the fires of a fashion magazine. And she, Grace Stone, still damp from the rain, with Christmas penguins on one sock and tacos on the other, was absolutely, irreversibly in the wrong place. Except it was the right place, just not the way she thought. Her new job, her new team, her new CEO, and she had just told him to step on it. He still hadn't exhaled since he walked into the conference room. Thomas Miller, the Uber driver she had cheerfully insulted. He was standing by the projector now, leading his opening remarks with the ease of a man who probably shaved with a diamond. Gris tried to shrink behind a tall intern. No use. His eyes flicked to her again. A microsecond, but it was enough. He'd read about him. Stonebridge's rising legend. Bought out 2 biotech firms before 30. Known for his ruthless restructuring. Never smiled. Didn't do social engagements. Except now he was smirking. Was that her legacy? Penguin socks and Uber jokes? She could feel the eyes of the entire room narrowing toward her like heat-seeking missiles. Her co-worker Rachel leaned over. That was him. Grace didn't answer. Her entire brain had short-circuited. Yamush continued, perfectly poised, voice like sleek velvet. And that brings us to our core philosophy. Adaptability. As Miss Stone here has already demonstrated, he glanced her way again. Sometimes being in the wrong place leads to the right opportunity. A chuckle from the back of the room. He wanted vapor. After the meeting, Grace made a break for it, but the elevator had other plans. Miss Stone. That voice again. He turned. Yes, Mr. Miller? He stepped closer, hands in his pockets, the storm in his eyes now simmering. He said I deserved 5 stars. He nodded, lips too dry to form words. I think I deserve more, maybe even 6. Was he He didn't wait for her to answer. You called me a silent Uber driver, he murmured as if it were an inside joke now. Said I smelled like wealth and regret. And was under duress. Of course. A beat of silence passed. The air between them thickened. Then, we are not... He blinked. But would I fire someone with such tactical creativity? He said and smiled. He started to walk away, then paused. And I'm Miss Stone. She looked up. Notice confirm your driver's name. Then he disappeared down the corridor, leaving her standing there with her heart caught in her throat and her entire dignity dangling from a very shaky thread. Back at her desk, Grace slumped into her chair. Rachel wheeled her chair closer, whispering like they were in a spy movie. He talked. He smiled at me. Grace groaned into her hands. Rocco's grin widened. Do you realize you're already a legend? Gross lifted her head just enough to whisper, he's going to promote me just to torture me. But deep down she wasn't sure anymore. Chapter 2. You ordered the CEO to drive you. Grace Scully had survived corporate death by humiliation. Now she was living in the purgatory of waiting for the axe to fall. It was only her first day at Stonebridge Corporation, and her face had already made a memorable entrance. Flushed, dripping wet, and panicked. Right before she publicly discovered that the man she'd mistaken for an Uber driver was actually her new boss, Thomas Miller, the billionaire CEO. Not just any CEO, the kind people whispered about with equal parts reverence and fear. And now he knew her name. Not because of a stellar resume, not because of her credentials. Because of the Croissant comment, the sock confession, and because she'd told him to step on it while frantically directing him through rush hour traffic. She had barely made it back to her desk before Rachel popped up at her side, grinning like a sitcom sidekick with popcorn in hand. He ordered the CEO to drive you. That's like a corporate myth come true. Elise, stop talking. Rachel plopped into the chair beside her. You don't understand. People are already whispering. One guy said you told Thomas to speed past a cafe with a French name. Growth dropped her forehead onto the keyboard. Because I did. Oh honey, Rachel patted her back. You're not just memorable, you're iconic. Gris groaned. This is how I die, viral. With penguin socks. She made it through the next few hours by breathing in 5-second intervals and avoiding eye contact with literally everyone. Each ping of her inbox made her heart stutter. Each time someone laughed near the copy machine, she was sure it was about her. Her body moved on autopilot, highlighting documents, replying to emails, while her soul attempted to exit through the building's emergency stairs. Then came the phone call. She stared at the extension number blinking on her desk phone. Rachel peeked over. Is that... Grace nodded slowly. Robert whispered. It's him, isn't it? Grace picked up the phone with a hand that shook like a leaf caught in a storm. Grace Stone speaking. Miss Stone, came the deep, even voice of Thomas Miller. Would you come to my office, please? He closed her eyes. Yes, sir, on my way. The walk to the executive floor felt like a slow march toward her own execution. The air up here was colder, crisper, expensive. Even the elevator seemed to glide in silence, as if not daring to disturb whatever deals or empires were being shaped on the upper levels. Thomas's office was sleek, modern, every edge sharpened with glass, steel, and impossible precision. He knocked twice, a beat of silence. Come in. He pushed the door open slowly, half expecting to be told to pack her things. But there he was, leaning against the edge of his desk in a charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than her rent, calm as ever, watching her with those storm-colored eyes. You called for me, sir. I did, he said. Please, sit. He took the chair across from him, spine straight, palms clenched. I wanted to thank you for this morning, he said. Wait, what? Grace blinked. You wanted to thank me? He nodded. It's rare that my first day begins with a free city tour, a coffee critique, and a comprehensive review of sock fashion. Was he teasing her? I'm really sorry, I had no idea. Don't apologize. He stopped mid-sentence. He stepped away from the desk, walked to the window. People hide too much in this building, behind protocols, titles, polished shoes, and perfectly worded emails. It's exhausting. Grace said nothing. He turned back to her. You were... She blinked again. That's not usually a word people use after I've insulted their French pastry budget. His lips twitched. I appreciated it, genuinely. She could only stare. Thomas paused for a moment, then added, I wanted you to hear it from me before it spreads. Grace's stomach twisted. Before what spreads? He walked to the side of the desk and picked up a sleek tablet, handed it to her. On the screen, a paused video thumbnail. Her face, rain-soaked, bright-eyed, captured mid-ramble in the passenger seat of a luxury car. To girl mistakes CEO for Uber driver. He stared at it in horror. There was a dash cam, she whispered. Oh my God. He didn't smile. HR's trying to control it, but someone leaked it internally, and it's already circulating. Grace felt her heart fall through the floor. I'm gonna be a mim, aren't I? Too late, he said dryly, but a good one. She looked up at him. You're not firing me. I'm promoting you. Grace's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I want you involved in an internal campaign, he continued. We're rebranding our company values. Human first, ground-level connection, humor, grit. You encapsulated all of it. I thought I encapsulated public humiliation. That too, he admitted, but in a very compelling way. He tried to process his words, failed completely, and settled on, is this a trap? Thomas looked genuinely amused now. You really do think I'm a Bond villain, don't you? I think you're terrifying, she said without thinking. Respectfully. He chuckled, an actual chuckle. Be in the auditorium at 10 tomorrow, he said. There's a leadership panel. I want to show the video and speak on authenticity in the workplace. I'd like you there. Me? He tilted his head. Unless you're busy rebooking a different Uber. Grace stood slowly, unsure if she was surviving, succeeding, or simply hallucinating from stress. I'll be there, she said quietly. At the door she paused. Sir? Yeah. Next time I get into a stranger's car, I'll double-check the license plate. Thomas smiled. I hope you don't. Life needs chaos, Miss Stone. Grace returned to her desk with a brain made of static and a smile she couldn't hide. Rachel was waiting. You look like someone who just avoided death or got kissed in a rom-com. Neither, Grace whispered, sitting down. He's putting me in the company video. Rachel screamed. Grace dropped her head onto her keyboard again. From somewhere in the distance, someone yelled, Is this the Uber girl? He sighed. This is my life now. But somewhere beneath the fear, the chaos, the embarrassment, something had shifted. He hadn't fired her. He'd remembered her name. And in his impossibly cold, polished world, he had smiled. Chapter 3. We need to talk. About your socks. The auditorium was full. Employees from every floor. Marketing, analytics, PR, even the grumpy facilities team from Level 6, had packed the place like they were about to witness a live product launch. But there were no prototypes on stage. Just a screen, and a very large pause icon hovering over Grace's rain-slicked face. Her voice echoed off the speakers in a muffled clip from the dashcam footage. Go, 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 step on it. Do you know how much they charge for croissants? $9. Grace wanted to crawl under her seat and die. Thomas Miller, however, sat beside her in the front row, composed, hands clasped, not a muscle moving. Why are you doing this to me? She whispered. You called me a silent Uber driver, he murmured back, making sure the whole company hears it. She narrowed her eyes. Revenge? Market. A moment later, the coordinator stepped on stage, cleared his throat, and addressed the crowd. Today's leadership panel will start with a brief video on authenticity, initiative, and what it means to bring your whole self to work. The lights dimmed. The video began. What followed was not a disaster. Not exactly. It was a perfect storm of humanity. The screen filled with grainy dashcam footage, Grace stumbling into the back seat, barking directions, rambling about breakfast guilt and mismatched socks. She lifted her pant leg in one part, proudly displaying Christmas penguins and Mexican tacos like they were designer labels. The room erupted. Laughter. Honest, uncontrollable laughter. And then, a sharp cut to Thomas's arrival in the conference room that same morning. His smirk. Grace, dropping her folder. The now infamous line. Especially those who mistook me for an Uber driver. The audience lost it. By the time the video ended, people were wiping tears from their eyes. Grace was somewhere between mortified and weirdly touched. She glanced at Tommy. He didn't smile, but his eyes flicked toward her, as if to say, I told you. The coordinator stepped up again. And now Mr. Miller would like to say a few words. Thomas rose with the precision of someone who knew exactly how to own a room. But this time he didn't pace. He didn't power pose. He walked slowly to the center, then did something unthinkable. He took off his jacket. He rolled up his sleeves. A gasp rippled through the audience. "Who was this?" "People ask me," he began, voice calm and measured. "What defines great leadership? Is it decisiveness, strategy, control?" He let the silence sit for a beat. "I think sometimes it's knowing when to get in the car and when to let someone else drive." A few chuckles. Grace Stone didn't intend to walk into my car, or my company, or my inbox for that matter, he added, eyes flicking to her again. More lava. But she did, and what followed was real. Unfiltered, unapologetically human. She reminded me, and perhaps many of us, that work isn't just about efficiency, it's about connection. He paused again, this time letting the words land. Authenticity doesn't make you less professional, it makes you braver. Then, without theatrics, he stepped aside and gestured toward her. "Miss Stone," he said softly, "would you join me?" Her heart stopped. He was going to faint. Rachel, from somewhere 2 rows back, whispered, "Do it, oh." Grace stood up with legs that felt like warm pudding. The applause came like a wave, uncoordinated, hesitant at first, then suddenly real. He walked up the steps. Thomas offered his hand. She took it, and then the microphone was in her hand. She stared out at the sea of polished professionals, every eye locked on her. No script, no plan, no way out. She began, voice cracking. "I wasn't supposed to be here. In this room, in that car, in this job, if we're being honest. Locker, mercy. But sometimes you get into the wrong car," she said, "and it takes you somewhere you actually needed to go." The room fell quiet. It was late, scared, wearing ridiculous socks, but I showed up. Because sometimes that's all you can do. She looked at Thomas. "And I'm grateful that someone didn't laugh me out of the building, or fire me on the spot, or sue me for emotional Uber fraud." The crowd roared. She took a breath. "And if I've learned anything this week, it's this. Being real isn't a weakness, it's a superpower." The applause came again, louder, longer. Thomas leaned in as she stepped back. He said under his breath. "You just made me famous for breakfast commentary," she whispered. "Who made you famous?" Back at her desk an hour later, the energy was still buzzing. Her inbox had 5 meeting invites, 2 PR interview requests, and 1 email from someone in HR titled Authenticity Summit Ideas. Racho walked over with a muffin. "If all you didn't faint, you won't." Grace accepted the muffin with both. "Doing better." Then, a shadow. He sat up straighter. "I need yous," he said. "Excuse me." He clarified. "On the 10th floor. We have investors coming Friday. I want you to help with prep, oversee the walkthroughs, point out flaws. You seem to have a good eye for unconventional details." Grace blinked. "You want me to point out flaws?" "Exactly. But leave the socks at home." "I make no promises." Thomas almost smiled. "Also," he added, stepping closer, "you looked good up there." Her breath caught. "You don't have to say that," "I don't say anything I don't mean, Miss Stone." And just like that he was gone again, silent, deliberate, and infuriatingly unreadable. That night Grace lay in bed staring at her ceiling. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Unknown. Sometimes the wrong ride leads to the right place. He smiled, closed her eyes, and for the first time since that rainy Monday morning, it felt like a beginning. Better for CEO, the croissant and the coffee machine crisis. The email from Thomas arrived at 7:22 IUD. Subject: Investor floor prep. He walked through the 10th floor. He checked everything: lighting, furniture alignment, signage, restroom supplies, and for the love of God, coffee. Be ruthless. I trust you. No greeting, no sign-off, no emoji. But he trusted her eye. It was basically a marriage proposal in Thomas Miller language. Grace sat up in bed, stared at the screen, and let the panic bloom. She was now personally responsible for making the entire 10th floor investor ready. She wasn't even entirely sure how to get to the 10th floor without accidentally hitting the maintenance level again. Ruthless, she whispered to his. By 30 IEW, she was standing in front of the elevator with a borrowed clipboard, a notepad titled Operation Don't Get Fired, and a lukewarm granola bar that doubled as breakfast and a nervous snack. 2 maintenance workers met her at the top. One wore a tool belt like a cowboy holster, and the other held a roll of duct tape like a badge of honor. "I'm Grace," she said, voice too bright. "I'll be coordinating the investor prep walkthrough today." They both nodded slowly. One squinted. "You're the sock girl." "Of course." The tour started smoothly. Lights flickering in room B. Reception couch, tilted at a weird angle, possibly cursing. Bottom signage slightly crooked. Looked like it was installed by someone on a skateboard. Then came the coffee machine. "This is broken," one of the techs said, lifting a scorched filter. The heating coils shot. Grace stared at the machine like it had personally betrayed her. A scale of 1 to coffee-flavored sadness. 10. "Can we fix it?" The guy shrugged. "We can try." 10 minutes later, she had coffee grounds on her hands, a streak of white paint on his sleeve, and a headache threatening to bloom like fireworks. Rocco called while she was elbow-deep in the supply cabinet. "Where are you?" "10th floor, living my worst Pinterest nightmare." "You're trending again. Someone made a meme of you holding that microphone with the caption, 'When the Uber turns out to be your CEO but you ride it to success anyway.'" Grace laughed. "Add it to my resume." Then the machine groaned and spit hot coffee grounds directly onto her blouse. "I have to go," she said, hanging up mid-scream. An hour later, her notepad was filled with "Replace fake fern with real fern." "Check why hallway smells like old popcorn." "Fix ominous flickering light," or rebranded as ambiance. That's when Thomas appeared. No warning, footsteps. Just suddenly there, leaning in the doorway with arms crossed. "You look like you've been fighting the building." "I think I'm losing," Grace muttered, brushing off her blouse and trying to hide the coffee stain. "Also, I may or may not have started a small war with the coffee machine." Thomas walked past her and inspected the floor like a general. "It's cleaner, brighter." "I tried to be ruthless," she said. "You look like you got tackled by a latte." "I did." He raised an eyebrow. "You still up for this?" He lifted his chin. "I haven't fled the building yet, so, yes?" He gave the smallest nod. "Good, you're doing better than expected." It was the Thomas version of a standing ovation. He couldn't help but smile. Later that afternoon, she was back at her desk, halfway through updating the checklist when a small envelope appeared in her inbox. Subject: a fair reward. In conference room. 1 double mocha, 1 warm croissant. No coffee grounds this time, you've earned it. Tea. He opened the door to find a table with 2 chairs, soft music playing faintly from his phone, and Thomas sitting with 2 paper cups and a familiar white bag. This is coffee," he said, pushing a cup toward her. "Sit down before it gets cold." He sat slowly, unsure whether to relax or brace for a surprise audit. He handed her a napkin. "You've proven you can survive a leadership gauntlet and an aggressive espresso machine." "I've survived worse," she replied, "like my croissant gulp." He smiled. "Still thinking about that?" "You don't forget a $9.00 pastry when your rent is due." A quiet beat passed. Gamache looked at her more seriously. "You do know you're good at this, right?" He blinked. "At what? Tripping, spilling coffee, being turned into a meme. At noticing what others don't, fixing things others ignore, being seen." The words hit harder than she expected. No one had ever told her that before. Not in her old jobs, not in her personal life, not even herself. "Thanks," she said softly, staring into her cup. "I don't hand out compliments often," he added. "Where? I'm putting this one in a fridge." Afterward, she returned to her desk. Phil a little dazed. Rachel was waiting like a gossip-hungry hawk. Did you just have coffee with the CEO? Grace couldn't look up. It was just caffeine diplomacy. Rachel snorted. Sure, if diplomacy includes croissants, eye contact, and forbidden tension. Please stop saying words. Tell me one thing though, Rachel said, serious now. How does it feel? To be the sock girl? To be noticed for real? Grace paused. Then he smiled, kind of terrifying and kind of fake, like I might not want to disappear anymore. That night, Grace sat at home with her feet tucked under a blanket, watching as her inbox pinged with updates from. Apparently Tammuz had mentioned her name and her initiative in a company-wide move that meant something here. He'd never mattered in a company before, never been more than a name on a chart or a shadow in a hallway. But now, he wasn't invisible. He was seen. And more dangerously, he was starting to feel seen by Tom. That part scared her most. Because the man behind the suit, behind the power, behind the silence, was starting to make her believe she was capable of more. Of leading. Of standing up. Of belonging. Absolutely. Here's Chapter 5. Don't fall in love with the CEO, but do check the coffee first. Grace Stone had a rule. Never fall for your boss. Especially when your boss is a billionaire who wears navy suits like armor and drinks his coffee, like it owes him something. But the problem with rules, they unravel quietly. Like the way Thomas Miller had started showing up without warning. Or the way his voice, measured low, maddened, lingered in her head long after he'd left the room. She had started noticing ridiculous things. The exact angle he tilted his head when he was amused. How he always smelled faintly like bergamot and clean linen. That his smirk came in two distinct flavors, sarcastic and dangerous. Don't fall for him, she told her reflection in the bathroom mirror that morning. Just be competent. And caffeinated. Unfortunately, her reflection just looked mildly terrified. When Grace got to the on-off, there was a sticky note on her monitor. 10th floor coffee machine still broken, bring reinforcements. He sighed, grabbed her notepad, and headed back to the scene of last week's latte trauma. This time she brought 2 tacks, 1 safety column and a backup thermos of cold brew labeled for CEO emergencies only. They were halfway through the floor check when Thomas appeared again, like he always did, without sound or ceremony. He turned mid-sentence and nearly smacked him with a clipboard. "Why did he do that?" she gasped. "What?" Appear like a ghost with perfect posture. His eyes flicked to the safety cone, trying to prevent another coffee catastrophe. "We call it preventative trauma management," she deadpanned. He almost smiled. He caught his breath. Later that afternoon, Thomas stopped by her desk. No announcement, no contact. Just, "Are you busy tonight?" He froze. Busy like in a corporate way, or like emotionally unavailable? He blinked once. "There's an investor dinner. I need someone who won't freeze when spoken to." You mean I talk too much?" "I mean you talk like a human." Grit stared at him, then down at her keyboard. Was this a trap? Are there cameras? Is this part of the next internal training video? "No," he said, almost amused. "But there might be shrimp cocktails, and at least 2 people trying to outrich each other." He laughed, despite herself. "You really know how to sell it." He tilted his head. "So, I need 20 minutes, and possibly lipstick." "Bring both," he replied. 7 p.m. The restaurant was all glass and shadows, and a hostess who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Thomas was already seated when she arrived. Suit, tie loosened, the faintest sparkle of something dangerous in his eyes. "You're early," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "You're late," he countered, handing her a menu she couldn't read because her pulse was in her ears. Dinner was quiet at first. Conversations danced around them in elegant circles. Tax breaks, property portfolios, silent partnerships in Shanghai. Grace ate slowly, unsure how to be both herself and not too much. Thomas, however, watched her. Like a CEO watches an assistant, not like a boss. like a man cataloging every blink. "You me?" she finally asked, voice barely above a whisper. "You were for this dinner, these moments. I'm not polished." "Exactly." He looked up. "You've been surrounded by polished my whole life," he said quietly. "It's exhausting. I never know what's real." "And I'm real?" she asked. "You don't know not to be." He swallowed hard. "That sounds like a compliment." "Worse. It's a liability," he said, his voice dropping lower, "because I keep finding excuses to be near you." The silence between them shifted. Not awkward, just heavy, magnetic. Grace's heart thundered in her chest. Was this happening? Was she sitting across from the most guarded man in Manhattan, while he quietly confessed that she undid him? Then, a vibration. Thomas glanced at his phone. His expression shut down like a switch. "Apologies," he said, suddenly standing. "Something's come up. I need to take care of it." "Ooh. Oh, he'll call a car for you. You don't have to." But he was already gone. Grace sat alone for several minutes, the untouched dessert plate in front of her suddenly feeling very symbolic. The next morning he wouldn't show up at the office, nor the day after that. Emails came, dry, impersonal, task-oriented. No notes, no smirks, no TM initials. Rachel noticed first. "Did he ghost you professionally?" she asked, eyes wide. Grace shrugged. "He's busy." But her heart knew better. It was avoidance, and it stung more than she wanted to admit. By Friday, she had convinced herself it had all been a misunderstanding, a blip, a dinner that meant more to her than it did to him. He was a CEO, she was an assistant who once spilled coffee on her own shoes. What had she expected? Somewhere between finalizing meeting decks and fixing a broken nameplate, Grace decided to move on. Until 4:59 p.m. Her phone buzzed. "Thomas, need your help on the rooftop. Bring a jacket." He blinked, then read it again. The rooftop was quiet, cold wind snapping at his sleeves. Thomas stood near the railing, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. "I'm sorry," he said without turning. "About dinner. About disappearing." Grace walked to stand beside him. "It's fine," she said. "No, it's not. I pulled away because I panicked. I thought I was protecting something." He looked at him. "Protecting what?" He turned then, really looked at her. "You, me, this, whatever it is." Grace felt her breath leave her body. "I've never done this before," he added. "Fallen for your assistant?" "You fallen." They stood in silence. "I thought I imagined it," she whispered. "You didn't." Then, very slowly, Thomas reached out. No sudden moves, just honesty, and touched her hand. And Grace knew in that quiet, electric moment, they had both just crossed a line. But it didn't feel like falling. It felt like flying. Chapter 6. The Rooftop, the Fall, and the First Real Lie. For exactly 3 days after the rooftop moment, Grace floated. Her steps were lighter, her heart steadier. She had even stopped flinching at every Slack ping. Thomas hadn't said the words, not directly, but she felt them in the spaces between, and how his hand lingered when he passed her a file, and how his eyes softened whenever they locked across a meeting room. In the silence that finally felt, he didn't kiss her that night. He didn't have to. That quiet, gloved touch of his fingers against hers, in the wind under the stars, said more than anything else ever could. He was in something now. It was something real. The office, however, was less subtle. By Monday morning, the whispers had begun. It started with a meme, a blurry shot of Thomas and Grace leaving the building together with the caption, "When the Uber ride turns into a love story." Then came the glances, lingering, curious, some jealous. And then someone said it out loud in the break room. "I mean, of course he'd like her. She's practically viral. It's a PR goldmine." Grace didn't hear it firsthand, but Rachel did. And Rachel, who'd been silent until now, walked straight to Grace's desk and dropped a sticky note. "Be careful. Not everyone wants to see you win." Grace read the note, then reread it, then folded it into her palm. Her stomach was tight the rest of the day. That night, Grace waited. She told herself not to. But she did. He waited for the rooftop text, the late-night message, the "I'm still thinking about you" kind of ping. Riffing came. The next day, Thomas passed her in the hallway and nodded. Proficient, cooker, district. Like the rooftop never happened. Grace blinked, her voice stuck in her throat. He was avoiding her. Again. Tuesday afternoon, she took the stairs to his office. Every flight louder than the last. Every step a war drum in her chest. He knocked once. Come in. He was seated, sleeves rolled, glasses perched on his nose. He didn't look up. "I just need 2 minutes," she said. Still, he didn't meet her eyes. "What is it, Miss Stone?" "Miss Stone." It hit like a slap. He shut the door quietly behind her. "Did something happen?" she asked, voice careful. "Because you've gone cold again, and I'd rather hear the truth than—" "It was a mistake," he said. The words landed with full weight. Ray stared at him. "I shouldn't have blurred the line," he continued, eyes on his screen. "I let something personal interfere with work. That won't happen again." He heard it, felt it, watched it sink into her bones like winter. "Okay," she said softly after a long pause. "I understand." But she didn't. Not at all. Again. Not until she was home. Not until the door closed and the silence wrapped around her like a second skin. He leaned against the wall, hands still trembling. He had lied. Because it wasn't real, but because it was. And that scared him more than anything. By Thursday, Grace was a ghost of herself. She smiled when she had to, laughed when prompted, but her edges felt dull. She had never asked for any of this, but she had believed it. She had believed him. And now she was just a rumor in a hallway. Another headline waiting to happen. Then, on Friday morning, the email came. Subject: End of quarter recognition. He went. The bundle cut off. To Grace Stone. The message: You've been selected as a guest of honor for your contributions to company culture and campaign visibility. Dress formal. Attendance required. He checked. Rachel read over her shoulder. "Oh," she said softly. "So he is still watching." Rayan. Grace. He stared at the screen, the cursor blinking in silence. Because now she wasn't sure if the email was a gesture of kindness or a track dress. Friday night came anyway. Grace wore a black dress with sleeves that made her feel like armor, and lipstick that told the world she wasn't scared. But she was. The venue shimmered with low lights and the soft hum of expensive jazz. She stepped into the ballroom and was immediately met with cameras, glasses raised, smiles forced. Yamu stood near the back, impeccable as always, cold as ever. When their eyes met, he didn't flinch. But he didn't smile too. The host took the stage. And now he announced, "We'd like to honor one employee whose presence reminded us all how one authentic voice can start a movement." The light turned. Everyone turned. Ray stood frozen. He walked up to the stage in a haze. The applause was loud, but it didn't reach her. All she could hear was the echo of, "It was a mistake." He took the "I didn't mean to go viral," she said with a soft smile. Politely outdoor. "But I did mean every word I said. That mistakes sometimes take you to the right place." The eyes flicked toward Thomas. He wasn't smiling, but he was watching. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 7. The speech, the silence, and the man who wouldn't say goodbye. The applause faded long before Grace got back to her seat. People were still clapping, smiling, whispering her name like it had become a brand. She could feel their eyes on her, the new face of authenticity, the girl who wore mismatched socks and accidentally exposed a company's soul. She sat down slowly, her palms still trembling. "Thomas having..." "Not really." He watched, stoic, still impeccable in a charcoal suit that said nothing while his eyes said everything she couldn't hear anymore. Richo leaned over. "You were incredible." Gruskrippy saw a soft smile. "Thanks. You okay?" He was lying. The dinner dragged. 5 courses, 3 speeches, too many glasses of champagne. Gracie didn't taste a bite. She couldn't. Her thoughts were a blur of what-ifs and if-onlys. He kept her gaze off him the entire night, until the very end when he disappeared without saying goodbye. No nod, no glance, no hand on her shoulder. No. The next morning she cleaned out her inbox. Not because she was leaving, but because she wanted to feel in control of something. She archived the PR emails, deleted the screenshots people had sent her of her viral moments, cleared out every meeting note Thomas had forwarded her over the past month. Her hand hesitated on one folder. It was empty, except for a single file. She deleted it without listening. By midweek, the silence between them was permanent. Thomas kept his distance, buried behind glass walls, and Bruce had stopped waiting. The day after the dinner, she'd stayed at her desk long after the office emptied, alone in the blue glow of her monitor. She'd whispered to herself the truth she didn't want to admit. He isn't coming back. And maybe, just maybe, that had to be okay. It wasn't until Thursday evening that it happened. The building was quiet, the kind of quiet that sinks into your sleeves. Grace stood in the copy room, waiting for a jammed printer to finish coughing up the last expense report. She leaned against the cabinet, her thoughts somewhere far away. The door opened behind her. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. Right? She turned anyway. Thomas. But not the Thomas from the boardroom. Not the... This Thomas had shadows under his eyes. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows. His voice sounded like it had forgotten how to lie. "I need to explain," he said. "No," she said gently. "You really don't." She shook her. "He made your choice. I made a mistake." It stopped her. He stepped closer. "I thought I could protect the company by keeping distance. I thought I could protect you. But I didn't. I hurt you." "You didn't just hurt me," she said, her voice calm. "You erased me." Thomas's jaw tightened. Grace looked at him fully now, the man behind the brow, the man who couldn't say goodbye because part of him never wanted it to end. "You don't get to disappear in return, like nothing happened." "I know." Silence. Then he reached into his pocket and handed her a note. He unfolded it slowly. It was handwritten, his writing. "Sometimes the only way to protect something good is to stay far enough away not to ruin it." Her throat tightened. "I almost left," she said quietly. "I know." He took a slow breath. "But I was hoping you might give me one last chance to not walk away." Grace stood him. Not with words. He looked at the man in front of her, the one who'd turned her worst day into her best chance, who had run from his feelings and come back to face them. And then she did something terrifyingly brave. He stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her tightly, not dramatically, just enough to say, "I'm still here." And Thomas, he closed his eyes, exhaled, and for the first time in years let himself hold someone like he meant it. Like goodbye wasn't an option. Chapter 8. When the CEO finally says stay, Yamas Miladov squeaked right away. He stood there, arms still loosely wrapped around her, as if unsure whether this was real or just something his mind had conjured up after too many sleepless nights. Grace could hear his heartbeat, could feel how tightly he held his breath. This was the most powerful man in the building, and right now he looked like he was waiting for her to let go first. But when he finally pulled back, his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. "Thank you for not walking away. I almost did. I know. Pa, it would have deserved it," he added. Grace looked up. "Maybe, but people aren't jobs, Thomas. You don't just close a file when it gets messy." He flinched at that. She softened. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to show up and stay when it's hard. I don't know how to be that person yet. It's start now. They didn't return to their desks after that, not right away. Instead, they walked down the back corridor, through the quiet lobby, and into the city night. No destination, no title, no schedules or executive summaries. Just two people. The man who'd once disappeared. The woman who once got in the wrong car. Walking together like they belonged in the same direction. You want coffee? He asked after a block. Grace blinked at him. You're seriously asking me that? You'll even confirm your name this time. He laughed despite herself. They ended up in a little cafe near Bryant Park, tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner, a place that smelled like cinnamon and spilled secrets. Grace stirred her drink. Is this the part where you tell me something that scares you? Dama didn't look away. I was 15 when my father told me feelings were liabilities. He blinked. And I believed, he said, until now. Silence. Then, I don't know how to be soft without fearing it makes me. Grace smiled gently. Then maybe you need someone who reminds you it. His eyes darkened. Like you? You didn't answer, not right away. Instead, she said, What do you want from this, Thomas? From me? He leaned in just slightly. I want to try to stay, to stop turning away when something feels real. He couldn't move. And if I can't promise perfection, he said, but I can promise presence. Will that be enough? Grace looked at him, heart pounding, and whispered, It might be everything. By the time they walked out, the city had gone quiet. No paparazzi, no board members, no rumors. Just two shadows under a street lamp. One tall, reserved, bruised but honest, and one small but unshakable, who never meant to change anyone's life. They stood in the cold, the pause stretching long between them. Then, softly, Tommy said, Come back with me. To the office? No, his voice dipped. To where this actually begins. The next morning, Grace stood in front of her mirror. Unfiltered touched the small gold key Thomas had handed her. It was for the elevator that led to his private floor. Not as a secret, not as a favor, but as unwritten. Rachel watched her from the doorway, sipping coffee. So, is this the end of the love story? Grace, no, she said. It's the beginning of a real one. At 9:12 Ayaquan, Thomas stood in the executive hallway. Short hand stood at his eyes. His eyes lit up the second she stepped off the elevator. And when she reached him, he didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He simply took her hand. No audience. No theatrics. Just the quiet, steady presence of a man finally learning to stay. It would make him want to. Chapter 9. You don't belong in my world, but I'm letting you in anyway. Grace knew the moment would come. The whisper that turned into a murmur. The glance that became a confrontation. After all, she wasn't part of his world. Not really. She hadn't grown up in penthouses. She didn't wear designer coats or quote quarterly earnings at dinner parties. He was the girl who showed up to her first day at Stonebridge soaking wet and socked. Now she was being called the CEO's complication. The gala was beautiful. Champagne towers, skyline views, the kind of guest list that wore polished smiles and shook hands like it meant something. Grace walked in with Thomas, her hand lightly on his arm, her heart steady despite the spotlight. She could feel it. Eyes. Febe direct. A young woman in a navy silk gown approached them within minutes. She had the polished look of someone raised among boardrooms. Thomas, she said, her voice warm and venom-laced. I heard you're making unconventional choices lately. He nodded once. CL. Her eyes slid to Grace. You must be the one who went viral. The Uber girl. Grace smiled politely. And you must be the one with a lot of opinions. Celia's smile faltered. Thomas stepped forward. Celia, this is Grace Stone. She's not just the face of our cultural campaign. She's also the reason our company finally feels like it has a soul. The room quieted. Ray blinked. It wasn't in the script. Celia stared at him. She doesn't fit, Thomas. He replied, his voice cold and clear. And maybe it's the room that needs to change. The moment didn't just ripple, it cracked the surface. By the time dessert was served, Grace had become the woman everyone suddenly wanted to know. Because of gossip. But because of him. Because Thomas Miller, the man who never let anyone in, had just stood at a podium and said her name with something dangerously close to reverence. Later on the rooftop balcony, she stood alone. The city stretched wide and glowing beneath her heels. "You okay?" His voice came softly from behind her. He turned. "Did you mean it?" Every word. "I don't fit here," she whispered. "Not in this dress. Not in this world. Not next to you." He stepped closer. "That may be true," he said, "but I've never belonged in it either." He met his eyes. "I didn't fall for your resume, Grace. I fell for the way you walk into chaos and make it feel like something worth surviving." She exhaled, and for the first time she let herself say it. "I'm falling for you, Thomas." He reached for her hand. "Then I'll be here when you land." The next day the headlines would swirl. But tonight, it was just them. A woman who thought she got in the wrong car, and a man who had never known how lost he was until she showed him the way home. Chapter 10. You got into the wrong car and found forever. They planet. There was no speech, no rooftop this time, no grand declaration. It was just Grace, sitting cross-legged on Thomas's penthouse floor, sorting through a stack of investor reports and leftover Chinese takeout. And him, across from her, barefoot, unshaven, reading her like she was the only thing that had ever made sense in a world full of numbers and noise. "You know," she said between bites, "this isn't how I thought my life would go." Thomas looked up. "What did you picture?" "Honestly, just a job, a desk, maybe an apartment that didn't leak." He smiled softly. "And now?" "Now," she whispered, "I feel like I walked into someone else's life and accidentally made it mine." He set his container down. "You didn't walk in, you rebuilt it." A pause. Quiet. Then he added, "Grace, I've never given anyone this much of me." She looked at him. "Does it scare you?" "It terrifies me." "Good," she said. "That means it's real." The next day, Thomas called a meeting. The boardroom was packed. Executives lined the table, expecting projections, graphs, the kind of quarterly brilliance that only Thomas could deliver. Instead, he stood at the head of the table and said, "Meet Grace." All heads turned. "This woman," he continued, "got into my car thinking it was an Uber. She gave me directions, talked about croissants, and told me the truth when no one else would." He turned to her. "And now she's the reason this company is changing not just how we work, but why." Silence. Then he got. And Grace? She didn't shrink. He stood, taller than she ever had. That night they drove. No driver, no limousine. Just Thomas at the wheel and Grace in the passenger seat, the way it started. "You know this is backwards," she said, smiling. "I got into your car first." He looked over at her, then down at the dashboard. "I kept this," he said, pulling out a small post-it from the glove box. It was faded, slightly crumpled. "Your handwriting. Please don't crouch, or judge the socks." He laughed, surprised. "You kept that?" "It kept you." The car stopped at a light. He turned to her. "I love you." Just like that. No fanfare. Just truth. She blinked back tears. "I love you too." Weeks later, the company launched its new campaign. The tagline? "Sometimes the wrong ride takes you exactly where you belong." Ray stood behind the curtain, ready to present it. And Thomas stood beside her, not as her CEO, but as the man who chose her not because she fit the mold, but because she broke it wide open. They were married on a rooftop. No press, no fireworks. Just light wind. She wore penguin socks under her gown. He wore a pocket square embroidered with a tiny croissant. And when the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Grace leaned in and whispered, "Are you not my Uber driver?" And Thomas replied, "I am. The ride that changed." They say love arrives when you least expect it. For Grace Stone, it arrived with a dead phone battery, a ruined umbrella, and a luxury car she thought was an Uber. For Thomas Miller, it arrived in the form of a woman who saw through his silence, past his title, and into the heart he forgot he had. It wasn't a perfect story. There were misunderstandings, silence, distance the moment they almost lost each other. But that's the thing about real love. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's someone yelling "go, go, go" from the back seat of your life, forcing you to look up, turn the wheel, and change direction. Thomas never thought he'd fall for someone like her. Grace never thought she belonged in a world like his. And yet they met in the middle, where laughter and loneliness collided, where vulnerability didn't scare them away but brought them closer. The real miracle wasn't that they found love. It was that they chose it. After every silence, for every almost goodbye, in the end it wasn't the car. It wasn't the job. It wasn't even the viral video. It was a moment unrehearsed, unplanned, when two people saw each other clearly for the first time. Instead, you don't need a perfect entrance to earn your place. You don't need polished shoes or practiced lines to be worthy of love. Sometimes all it takes is showing up, rain-soaked, breathless, and trusting that the right person will see you. Not despite the mess. Or because of it. If you've ever been great, if you've ever gotten into the wrong place at the wrong time and wondered why life led you there, maybe it's because it wasn't wrong at all. Maybe it was the beginning of your forever. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in unexpected beginnings. Nkawa, have you ever stumbled into love by accident? We'll be here, waiting for your story. Just like Grace. Just like Thomas. In case the next ride takes you exactly where you're meant to be.